Let's go into present. Thing. There it is. So, welcome to the Firebase Analytics Workshop for Android. Now, I say Android, but some of what we're actually going to be covering here is kind of universal. The implementation that we're going to be going through, and the code is all open source, and we'll kind of add to it a little bit as well as part of going through this. I want you to know that the methods that we're using are fairly universal regardless of platform. So even though an Android example, really send events, the naming conventions, all those kinds of things. There's a quick start, log events. Here is the same way you log events in JavaScript or in Swift or any kind of language that you really want at this point, there's support for. So let's just get going. We're going to start out with a video that kind of explains where we're starting from. Hopefully, audio is working. And okay, we have very low, can you?
Although they're important to building a successful app. Different kinds of analytics tools for app developers to use. There are in-app behavioral analytics, which measure who your users are, what they're doing, and so on. And then you've got attribution analytics, which you can use to measure the effectiveness of your advertising and other campaigns, not to mention push notification analytics and crash reporting. But quite often, this work is being done by completely different analytics libraries, which means you've got reports moving in various tools across the web and trying to understand trends across these different reports, much less get them to talk to each other, isn't always easy. Google Analytics for Firebase. It's built from the ground up to provide all the data that mobile app developers need in one easy place. It starts by giving you free and unlimited logging and reporting. Quotas, no sampling, and no thing to really worry about. On the Firebase SDK, you start providing insight into your app. Information on who your users are, how regularly they use your app, how much time you spend there, and how much they spend in the app. So you can get detailed information about what your users are up to by logging events specific to your app. These can include common events that Google Analytics for Firebase has already defined, like when your users add names to their cart, and then there's support for custom events you create yourself, like when your user completes a workout in your fitness app, in your photo app. It's not just about seeing what your users are doing, it's also about discovering who your users are. Demographic information, you can discover how your different users behave differently by setting custom user properties. Have a music app and want to find out whether your classical music fans are browsing more albums than your jazz music fans? That's the kind of data you can easily break out thanks to custom user properties. And Google Analytics for Firebase doesn't just measure what's happening inside your app, it lets you combine behavioral reporting, attribution reporting, or what growth campaigns are bringing people to your app in the first place. You want to know which ad campaigns are bringing you users who spend the most money, or are sharing the app with their friends, or have unlocked the last level in your game and are ready for the sequel. Google Analytics for Firebase. But don't stop there. Once you have all this information, you can take action on it using audiences. Google Analytics for Firebase gives you the power to build up groups of users, or audiences, out of just about anything you can measure in your app. You will visit the sports section of your in-app store. It's in the Firebase console. Once your app has built up this audience, you can then send a notification. In-app experience using Firebase or Config. AdWords, Google's ad platform. When you measure using Google Analytics, you can confirm you're getting the outcomes you expect. It already comes with a dashboard that lets you view answers for common questions. Specialized analysis, you can export all of your data into BigQuery. In the cloud, where you can run super fast SQL queries to slice and dice this data however you'd like. You can even combine it with other analytics data that you might be capturing. expert with what Google Analytics for Firebase can do for you. To find out more, check out our documentation here and give it a try.
So the reason for a video is that does a very good and succinct way of explaining a lot of concepts very quickly we need to know before we get going. Namely, looking at this, why could it be useful to you? The fact that, yeah, it's free. It's free to keep going. The actual analytics itself is in a very interesting way. So if you have query, being able to export it to BigQuery. So that's possible. Have payment information, Firebase or Google billing account, which that's free, CP or Google Cloud Platform, just off the. But then that way it will actually save and log all of the intricate information for as long as you choose to keep it up in the cloud. And there's another video kind of going through some of the payments and how much things cost, but 20,000 active users, it's very typical that your actual cost of frequently storing that data, other than perhaps notifications, but we're talking purely about the analytics side, less than $5 a month. I'm not sure of platform that gives you this kind of free off the get-go, and then also cost to do much more advanced things is actually quite small. Just commenting on there because it says free, like it's Google free, you know, but essentially it would be free for $300 you get, and for the lifetime of whenever you make an app, unless it's the end of time, you would end up not having any out-of-pocket cost. Oh, sorry, it escaped present mode. Let's go back. So what are some other things they don't really talk about in this video? Can start to do are things like watch a user and replay a user if you assign them in real time. What events are they doing? What are the user flows? How are they going through your application? Impact points, be able to actually measure that. That's pretty powerful. I don't even know if there's anything that lets you do that in a very succinct way other than this platform at this point. Deep user interaction and grouping. So user interaction and grouping, yeah, you can fix and audience and things like that, but start to do things with like fancy machine learning and fancy grouping based off of other information you know about the user, those kinds of things. You can start actually adding that in, which is pretty cool. And analytics for Firebase, it was Firebase analytics before. It's really now, because ancillary tools of Google Analytics for Firebase, they're still calling it, I mean, the name's still in flux, but it has a lot more going for it. And kind of what does this mean? This is kind of the most complete analytics solution at the moment. And given the fact that you can just kind of get up and go, that's pretty cool. So here with the fact that what was known Fabric.io from Twitter, known as Crashlytics. So kind of other things are kind of merging together. Now, Google does say keep with Crashlytics strictly for crash reporting at this point. Even if you are using their analytics platform, that is actually a fairly recent development that they posted that. It's not immediately shown, but things to kind of know there. Now you also have performance monitoring. So Firebase Performance is in beta. You can basically request access to it, or you get approved as long as you have. And that way you can actually get things like how long API taking, deeper things along user engagement. And now you have TensorFlow. We were talking about some of those fancy ways that you can do auto grouping and have that kind of be handled from a machine side and not somebody actually physically having to do grouping. Pretty unique, pretty different. Again, that would be something that normally you'd have to handle in a whole other service and you'd have to write it all from scratch. The interfaces to handle it, and it's all cyclical and feeds right back into it. So I'll show you this a little bit later, but you have owner, consumer, client views, a ton of different ways that you can assign ownership. So you are a company like Bottle Rocket, or just within your own company organization, you may not want to give full access or full viewing capabilities, full editing capabilities to clients or to certain managers, but you want them to be able to see the work that's being done. Edit the information that they see, edit the information that they have access to so that they still are seeing the analytics, but you can kind of paint a better picture in terms of is pertinent information for them and make sure that your stuff isn't getting messed up in the process. That's kind of a very valuable thing in being able to share. And also what's cool about that is because that user ownership is handled through Google Cloud Platform, that means client own maybe analytics stuff and cloud stuff, they can actually yours from BigQuery and other services and be able to directly integrate it into their own back-end systems without having to own the data. Again, one of those high visibility, large functioning, large organizational problems, but they're a big business. And you actually use an app versus sitting on your laptop in order to accomplish a task. It's probably a good portion of the time, right? Especially for smaller interactions or even kind of. So that's nice. And one thing that we didn't have before is that you can do it phone number based authentication. So you can do users based off of their phone number, not strictly just the secure settings or some other user assigned by install username. So that way you can kind of maintain over multiple years as they may upgrade phones or move or something along those lines. So I'll start writing machine learning code in order to do fancy analytics stuff and move forward into our, robotic future. Our robotic overlords, I will be serving at your whim. So now let's get into some of that Android code. And I'm going to sit down for this because this thing is really short and trying to type while standing is not going to work. So I have included right here, right with me, Firebase Analytics Workshop code, Android project. Let's get it going. So personally, switch to the large mode. I'm double tapping. What is not happening? Why is it not going full screen? Okay, where's my view full screen?
The drop-down box.
Yeah, sorry, Command F. Oh, up arrow, Command F. That's kind of weird. Let's move this a little bit. Here is kind of a you have a user login, which we're actually going to end up emulating, and a Bringing it up so that you can see right here. So we just have kind of a main application superclass. We have our main activity is going to have kind of some fragments involved and some tab views, and we'll actually be getting different user interactions. And then we have a login activity that happens before we even get to that point. So that's our actual startup point. We require the user to log in order to actually use our application. What? I'm sorry? Just the little zoomy thing. And shift plus. No. Command plus. I remember the. But it's not moving forward. It's not making it big. Why isn't it feeling big?
You can marry, don't you know?
I kind of live in the Canary channel. That's probably on edit the view thing. Maybe we can make this a little bit. How do we make this bigger? Hey, what's the way to make this bigger? Who wants to look that up? There we go. There we go. Come on. Yeah, sorry. Much better, right? So the activity, then we will move to the main activity once we have a successful login, have our application instance declared there. So, how do I move through this tab? Oh, no. Okay. Exit presentation mode. And then we'll move to the next piece here. So what we want to go through is take a look at first our so in our main application here is setting it up so that we have our Firebase analytics. Oh, actually, I should probably share this piece. Exit presentation mode. So the first things that you're actually going to want to do is here, which is your application Gradle. Let's see if we can view this in share presentation mode. So I've got my kind of base application.gradle. You want to do plugin if you haven't. That this be at the very of your application or your /app build.gradle. Ahead of higher up, maybe where you're doing some of your other plugins, it's going to cause a lot of weird build errors and it's going to have a lot of weird problems. Sorry for that. I've definitely hit that before where I was just thinking I somehow messed up the Gradle build system because it doesn't say that this actually needs to be applied explicitly on their setup page and quick start page and getting started page. But it's very important that this is at the very bottom of the build Gradle. Right. So it wants to do a sync, of course. And then in our kind of overall Gradle file, right? So the one that's for the entire app, not our /app. Let's go here. We want to add Google Services dependency. Version, it's like 3.1.2. At the time of me building it, was 3.1.0. Yay. So once we have this portion, I want to kind of just show you what the app is like without any of that. So open up our settings, make sure that we have never actually opened this application before. Okay, no. Oh. Computer slowness. Okay, storage. This is what it looks like on a fresh. What we're doing is asking for access your contacts so that, you know, hey, actually use this and use existing emails that you might have stored. We have a user on here. It's a simulated device, but you'll see that I'm kind of simulating a network call. That's why you get that progress bar. And we actually have, as part of this, an implementation that checks whether or not you have a username and a password, and if the password is correct. So our password is just hello. We're going to do a sign in. Our login was successful. What's your favorite food, everybody? Pizza. Pizza wins. Okay. Simple application. The ability to go through, right? A normal scenario where events to track here, some pages to track here, activity the entire time, right? Some of what Firebase is already tracking may not capture everything that you care about. That's something to think about in terms of what it gives you built in. Those things are in just a moment. Let's take a look at code again. So, all right, we've got our analytics in there. Think actually pull all of that in for us. And it's still running, but let's keep moving forward. At our login, our activity, not main active, our main application. Here, let's go review. To have a quick button for that. So here we're actually going to declaration of our Firebase analytics, and we wanted to actually capture this instance. Anybody have an idea why this is at the onCreate of our application and not necessarily with the first activity? There's one other reason. Yeah, but this is a get instance. That means that it's already up. But remember that Firebase Analytics is kind of different in that a lot of the hooks are already put into Google Play Services, which means that for like an Android device, a lot of that's already and they can have a single Firebase instance that's servicing multiple customers, not just your application. So what's a reason we would want to have this in the onCreate?
Extrapolating some of the analytics without specific value.
I think you guys are thinking way too advanced for this. Things that we want to probably capture is when the app was started. Activity fails in a glorious fashion, whether or not somebody even tried to start it up in the first place. That never happens, right? But having this as part of the onCreate, we can start tracking that information super quick. And it also means that we can kind of get some of those early threaded pieces for the rest of the application. So as the UI thread is kind of, which is kind of intensive when you open an application for the first time, or from the first time. So this allows us to kind of hit that just before we start reloading up other parts of the application and send kind of initialization data directly to them. So I'm also using a get instance here, and I'm going to kind of point out some things. So you can actually make it so that if you wanted to do some abstraction, which I'll show you a little bit later in terms of your analytics layer, it might be nice to have just some variables or things like that where it's kind of a one-time. But remember that because we are doing a get instance, we can call this from anywhere in the application, and we will pretty much end up in the same context. Isn't gonna change, and the Firebase instance is not truly unique to just us. There's kind of some complicated things. For my own, I like having it in one place, start it up in one place, and reference from one place, because then I don't have to track things down or I can eliminate something, and then I can quite easily see where errors and other things are a problem. So, kind of my own deal. And let's go start with our login. As a presentation mode. I apologize that this is actually fairly a more advanced login screen than meets the eye. Kind of apologies for that. But what are some things that we might want to actually track in terms of login?
Logins, IDs, and passwords.
True. And you earn the #1 spot. See, this is where, hey, now you know swag is involved, and it's good swag. So things to pay attention to. So what's something else that we might want to track in terms of login? Something might be used. Wait. Something there. Anybody else? Successful login? Cool. So we can see we have some fancy stuff here. All of that. Now this we won't get into until a little bit, but you know, our request contacts, maybe we might want to track that if the user denies. Not something that would affect the success of their login, but it would mean that maybe people don't want to give, maybe a lot of our users don't want to complete on, right? Yep. Here we're doing our attempt login, so we're going to check whether or not inputs, and then if they're empty, and we don't know at this point if we actually have good, but there's an async task, new user login task, that is going to go here. So just saying simulating a network access with 2 seconds of a loading, just so that you can kind of see what's going on. I'm just checking whether or not things are real or not, and if they, I'm going to save those credentials. Then if they're not real, I'm going to, and I'm going to monitor my success here, email up there. So login, one thing that we might want to do is actually give a name to a user. have to be something that's tied directly to anything else. And it doesn't necessarily have to be unique either, because that uniqueness is already going to be kind of set for us. But that way we can kind of say, okay, you know, a little bit more human than a number or a combination of random numbers and letters and symbols when you're looking at a user in and of themselves. So how would I actually get started with any of this? That's the one. Nope.